Machines That Fail Us, a podcast by the Media and Culture Research Group at the University of St. Gallen about the human rights implications of AI errors and failures and our future with artificial intelligence. Welcome to the second episode of the second season of Machines That Fail Us. My name is Philip Di Salvo, and I'm a researcher and lecturer at the University of St. Gallen, a member of the Media and Culture Research team in the Institute for Media and Communications Management, and the host of this podcast. Welcome back to Machines That Fail Us. Machines That Fail Us is a podcast focused on the societal implications of AI errors and what they reveal about our future with artificial intelligence. We explore these topics through interviews with international experts from media, research, activism, and entrepreneurship, each offering insights from the area of expertise. In the first episode of this season, released last month, we discuss issues related to information disorder and how artificial intelligence tools are already being used in the context of mis- and disinformation. Let me remind you that all episodes of Machines That Fail Us, including those from the first season, are available on the University of St. Gallen and Human Error Project websites, as well as all major audio and podcast platforms. Today, we will delve into the human labor behind the AI systems we now use daily, particularly focusing on the precarious and exploitative working conditions of the humans behind the machine who help us maintain reliable and trustworthy AI systems. How are humans involved in building AI? And how much do we know about this largely invisible workforce, mostly based in the global south, that works behind the scenes under extremely poor conditions? For this episode, I'm extremely happy to be joined today by Adio Dinika. He works as research fellow at the Distributed AI Research Institute. Adio is a political scientist specializing in platform labor and platform governance. He received his PhD from the Bremer International Graduate School of Social Sciences in Germany, focusing on critiquing techno-optimistic narratives of platform labor in sub-Saharan Africa. He is also involved in the Data Workers Inquiry Project, which we will discuss in details with him during our interview today. I should also mention that the Distributed AI Research Institute is an interdisciplinary, globally dispersed research institute focused on artificial intelligence. It operates on the principle that AI's outcomes are not predetermined. Its negative impacts can be avoided, and that by incorporating diverse perspectives and international processes in the development and use, AI can be made beneficial. The founder of the institute is Timnit Gebru, one of the most influential experts about AI and its societal implications, and a huge inspiration for all our work. Adio, it's a great pleasure to have you on Machines That Fail Us, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Philip.
So the first things I would like to discuss with you is how do we actually make sense of AI? Because if I look at your work, artificial intelligence looks way more human than we usually think of it. So I would like to ask you, who are the data workers you have been studying, and what's their contribution to the building of AI today?
So usually I like your beginning premises when you say that artificial intelligence sounds more human than it's made out to be. The reason is that it really is more human than it is made out to be. Usually when I talk about AI and the labor behind it, I usually have two propositions that I put forward. The first one is that machines are stupid. And the second one being that human beings are unhinged.
Okay.
So this is where data workers come in. When I say machines are stupid, what I mean is a machine cannot tell that this is a pen and this is a phone. They cannot tell these things apart. So someone, a human being, has to be able to teach them that this is a pen, this is a phone, this is a cat, and this is a cow. Yes, this is 4 legs, but it's actually a donkey, not a cow.
Yeah.
So because machines cannot tell this difference. And the next part is when I say human beings unhinged is you can think of something that is terrible that you can think of.
Yeah.
Someone out there is posting that on the internet. So when AI, as we know it today, usually referring to large language models like ChatGPT, when it's built, it scraped the internet and took all the trash that is there on the internet to make these systems. So there needs to be human beings who say, this cannot be said. This is wrong. So basically, data workers are the people who do this work. So we're talking of data annotators, data labelers, and content moderators. They are the ones who pretty much teach AI to, I use this word grudgingly, think, because I don't quite think it thinks.
Yeah. So in a sense, we usually use this labeling to describe how these people work and the kind of activities they do, as you just told us. But can you dig into more, what is the actual work these people do? What's their daily routine, for instance, when they perform the tasks?
So it definitely depends on the project. But to put it simply, think of it as someone goes to work and they have like 10,000 images that need to be labeled, to be classified. Or if, for example, we're talking about AI, which is then used to develop autonomous vehicles, someone needs to teach this car that this is a street, this is a bicycle lane, and this is the lane where the car should go. This is a traffic light, and this is red for stop, green for go. So basically, someone goes into their workplace to basically point out these things. So take a picture of a street, right? A still image. Someone has to label each and every single thing appearing on that image, so that is then uploaded into this system to then develop this AI that can be used for a driverless vehicle. So think of AI that can be used, let's say, for in medicine, for post-mortem, for example. That means someone, and by someone I mean a data worker, is given a picture of a dead body, and think of a dead body in every stage that you can think of, from peacefully deceased to violently murdered to fresh, just dead, to decomposing. So they have to label everything they are seeing there and say, okay, this is a nose, this is a hand, this is a finger, this is a left index finger, and everything in that. So this is what data work entails. This also means audios, for example, what we are communicating right now. Someone listens to this, then they have to help generate the text for what we're talking about now. So think of it as you're given random audios, different accents from different parts of the world in whatever language. Then you have to say, okay, you have to say word for word what these people were saying. And then when we at the back end get a transcription software that can easily transcribe this. But before we got there was a person way to do this for the machine to be able to know that when I say that, I mean that, it's this is how it's spelled.
Yeah. So if I think of what you just described, it also brings me back to social media and content moderation there. But what you just told us, it goes like one step beyond. It's no longer just content moderation, it's the actual creation of AI. And I think it's fascinating, but also concerning for reasons we will discuss later, to see that actually this artificial intelligence we have today, it is actually the result of the work of human beings.
Yeah, pretty much it is the work of human beings, which is why I have been quoted at times to say AI is neither artificial nor intelligent.
Yeah.
It's basically people who are doing this work. Actually, in some cases that I have also come to find out during the course of my work, there's actually something called AI impersonation, where you think you're dealing with an AI tool, but you're dealing with some guy sitting behind a computer in a warehouse in Nairobi or in Bangalore, India. So this also happens. So there are moments, of course, where these people are used to train these AI systems, and then we have an AI product, right? But there are also situations where there is not even any AI to speak of. They actually are people who are doing this work. Then this is called AI. I give you an example of workers who actually sometimes work with monitoring long-distance truck drivers. So this worker is sitting in an office in Uganda, and they are watching the road together with the driver. So essentially, we're saying, AI is helping the driver navigate. But no, there is a guy in a warehouse in Uganda who is sitting there. Literally, they can't fall asleep because they are driving with this driver. When they see the driver is falling asleep, they send a signal. And then we're like, yeah, AI is so advanced, it now helps drivers stay safe. But there's evidence of these things happening.
And it's literally one person sitting somewhere else.
Yes.
So far we discussed like the philosophical implications of like the human nature of artificial intelligence, but your work has been mainly focused on the working conditions of these people and actually the daily lives, which are terrible in most of the cases because the working conditions are exploitative. They are really like working in terrible conditions. So all of this, of course, and you already mentioned countries that are in the global south. And it's like, I see many levels of exploitations in there. So my question for you is, how do you see this as an example of the inequalities that are embedded in how AI is built today?
You see, the thing with AI today, the way it's framed is you can literally trace it back to the eugenics movement.
Yeah.
And you can trace it to colonialism, which is also linked to the eugenics movement. This is how it is today. So what happens is often we celebrate Sam Altman, we celebrate Elon Musk, we celebrate these tech bros or the broligarchy, as we are seeing happening in the US now.
Yeah.
But behind this are the people who are actually doing the actual work. I'm not talking of the coders who are sitting in fancy office in Silicon Valley getting six-figure salaries. I'm talking of workers who are often recruited because of their particular socioeconomic position.
Mhm.
So I'm talking of workers in countries like Kenya who are recruited specifically because they live in a slum, which means if you live in a slum, you literally have very little going for you. So you are more likely to accept whatever conditions we give to you. And also, if we ill treat you, who are you going to run to? And there's also a method to the madness that the people who are recruited are usually people in terrible living conditions already. And usually in countries where the labor laws are either lax or they're not exactly enforced, where someone will say, well, you know what, a job is a job. So, for example, we see that there are workers during our research at the Data Workers Inquiry.
Yep.
There are data workers who are based in Lebanon, Syrian refugees. And these are people who are already in a very complicated socioeconomic status. And therefore, they are willing to take anything. So this is what you then see happening, where there's a deliberate targeting of people who are already in difficult economic situations. Because, I mean, you want to sue Meta? Okay, good luck. You have the money to sue that? You don't have the money to sue Meta. And also, you then see again sometimes a collusion between these big tech companies and some governments. For example, recently, I sadly watched a video of the Kenyan president saying, we've passed a bill that will make it impossible to sue Sama. And I was there like, excuse me?
Yeah.
This company is here exploiting your people and there's documented evidence, but you are siding with them. So it's an issue of exploiting the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable. And then we just sweep them under the rug.
Yeah.
It's like they are there under the rug, and we just see the shiny announcements being made. That OpenAI has released a new model. They've upgraded their system. This is what we have now. But no one talks about the Kenyan workers who had to sift through tons of horrible content to sift out to make sure that AI does not end up being a Nazi production.
Yeah. So like us in Europe, US, etc., we get the shiny, very efficient product, but the reality behind that is terrible, as you just described. So sometimes we describe AI as a black box because we don't have access to the code, we don't have access to the training system, to the training data, but also something that gets hidden and kept secret in many cases are these working conditions. So how do you see this inside the black box metaphor? Is that part of it?
I would say yes, but maybe the difference being that someone could argue that the black box, the algorithms, the code, they are being protected for proprietary reasons, because they don't want other people to manufacture this. But when it comes to workers, the idea really is about profit maximization. There is nothing to protect there in terms of replicability. The whole issue there is that let's keep these hidden. Let's not talk about them. And then if we can't talk about
Yes.
them, they don't
Yeah.
exist. Let's amplify the coders. Let's amplify these shiny toys. And we don't talk about these people. So exploitation or abuse happens in the dark.
Yeah.
So as long as this stays in the dark, then we can ignore it's happening. We can continue doing whatever exploitative stuff we are doing, which is why you see that these big techs are very, very much against any form of unionization.
Yes.
Because what unionization will do is to shine the light on what they are doing. And once that happens, then the world says, whoa, wait a minute. Should we really be embracing this company when it has this egregious background?
Yeah. All of that you are describing reminds me of this debate we have sometimes that we should not humanize artificial intelligence. But actually the issue is we are dehumanizing humans who are working behind the scenes to create the machine. These things are kept in the dark. Some stories are emerging thanks to your work, thanks to your colleagues, thanks to some journalistic investigations, thinking about the Time investigation by Billy Perigo about Kenya, which is a country where you also have worked on quite recently. Do you think something is changing? Like there is more light being shed on these cases, there is more awareness and visibility to these stories, and what is still needed to be done?
I like where you began with talking about the dehumanizing. That's exactly what's happening, because now when we talk about AI, we talk about the system, the algorithm, the machine,
the
all
magic.
fancy and shiny words, We never talk about the humans. And we always say, there won't be any need. Human beings are being replaced by AI. And I am like, really?
Yeah.
Really? Coming back to your question, yes, definitely. Thanks to the work of people like Billy Perigo, Karen Howell, James Maldunma Graham, Antonio Casilli, and my colleagues at DAIR. Definitely, there is more light being shined on this labor behind AI, and that is very good because now we have more conversations around it in the mainstream. So, for example, my colleague Milagros Micheli has given testimonies at the EU Parliament a couple of times now. This is very important. Hopefully, this will be used or will be incorporated in EU AI laws that are to come. So definitely there is stuff being done now. And this is one of the things that we really want to happen, for light to be shown, but also not just end there. Action has to be taken. So one of the things that I've always said is that these companies headquartered in the global north, where there are labor standards, where there are very clear respect for human rights. But what these companies are doing in the global south, be it in Venezuela where people are being paid with gift cards, or in Kenya, or in Syria, or in Lebanon, the standard working or labor rules and regulations which exist in the countries where these companies are headquartered are not being applied to. So if this is an American company, Sama is headquartered in San Francisco. So if this is an American company that is going out there and exploiting people, and the profits are coming back to the US and they are paying taxes in the US, then something has to be done there. So more has to be done, particularly by governments where these companies are headquartered, to rein them in. Because what they are doing in Africa, which is very sad, what happens is that because there are more than 50 African countries, what is then going to happen is that they will go into one country, Kenya. When things happen in Kenya and they get sued or they get taken to court, what do? They skip the border and move to Uganda. And if stuff hits the fan in Uganda, what's going to happen? They'll go into the next country. So, when we get to 54, you see what's happening here. So, which is why more needs to be done, and particularly at a continental level where the African Union, for example, says if an AI company is going to recruit in Africa, these are the conditions. But not just Africa, because there still are people being exploited in the Philippines, in India. So then that has to grow beyond just Africa, but to be at that international level. So if organizations like the International Labour Organization, other human rights organizations can be able to set standards where we say this is essentially slave labor. This is indentured servitude that's happening here. So if we can be able to have standards that apply across the entire world, so that companies will not go to that one poor country with high unemployment where people are willing to take anything.
Yeah, this is pure and simple colonialism applied to data work. I mean, there's no other way to describe this in my view. Is there forms of resistance by the workers? You mentioned unions before, and I wonder whether there is some movement among the workers who are coming together to join forces against this state of things.
Yes, the answer is yes, and I'm very happy to say yes to this.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple of initiatives that are already popping up in different parts of the world.
Mhm.
And I'm happy that Kenya is actually one of the countries where serious things are happening in terms of resistance. So there's the African Content Moderators Union that started from Kenya, but the name is African, not Kenyan, because basically it's composed of people from different African countries who are in this. And on the 13th, we're actually supporting the launch of the Data Labelers Association, which is another union or another association of data labelers, primarily in Kenya, but looking to expand beyond just Kenya. So these are things that are happening. So that's resistance. And we have organizations like Tech Opticon, which are also global, who are also doing impressive work in terms of building resistance. And I'm happy to say that as part of the efforts that we are engaging in the JWI, there actually has been conversations between workers in Africa and Tech Opticon's global reach, because Tech Opticon literally has people from all over the world. So there have been these solidarity conversations, and we're also working on enhancing or helping to build more solidarity among workers. But actually, what I'm happy about, especially about the Data Labelers Association, which will be launched on the 13th, is that it's purely organic. It's purely workers who came together and said, guys, enough is enough. We have to do something. Then they called and said, hey, guys, we have been thinking. And we're like, oh, wonderful. It's exactly how we want it, where it's from below. The workers themselves say, we want this to happen. And also that my colleagues have managed to go and speak at the European Parliament means that legal bodies are taking cognizance of this. And that also helps in terms of driving towards respecting the rights of these workers.
Yeah, it's great to know that there is movement and there is finally some forms of resistance. And this brings me to one of the many projects you have been involved recently, which is the Data Workers Inquiry, which I looked on the website, and it's great work, especially when it comes to the direct engagement of the workers themselves. So can you tell me more about the project and how it is developing, and how do you see it in this context of resistance?
So the Data Workers Inquiry is basically a project where we said we would like to understand more about the working conditions of the workers who power AI.
Mhm.
And what better way to understand this than listening to the workers themselves talk about their experiences? So we, in this project, said we're not going to be helicopter researchers where we fly from our fancy offices in Europe, the US, and land in Kenya, ask 10 people and make conclusion and fly back. But rather we say we're going to recruit data workers themselves, whom we are not going to treat as informants, but rather as core researchers, which means that as we went about this project, we were in constant conversations with them. They took ownership of the project. So if you look at the output on the DWI website, you see different things there. There are documentaries, there are vlogs, there are reports, there are animations. It's because we say to the workers, how best do you want to tell your story? I'm an academic. If you ask me how to tell a story, I'll write a paper, right? but we said we want you to tell us how you want to tell your story in a way that you think you understand, and we'll then support you in that. So when we come to the issue of resistance, this is where we are sort of flipping the script, where we were used to researchers being authorities, fancy, shiny PhDs, and talking about what the exploitation of the workers when the workers themselves are not inside. We say, no, we want the workers themselves to be in the fore and say, hey, guys, I am so and so. I've worked as a content moderator, and these were the conditions that I went through. So you cannot argue with someone who's telling you that this is what I went through. You can't. If
Yeah.
I say this, you can say, oh, come on, you knew this from Bremen. But if someone says, hey, I was doing this work, here are my medical records, I've been treated for PTSD, you cannot argue with that. So this is what we aimed at. And one of the other, I won't call it subtle, but one of the aims behind the DWI was that we wanted workers to start talking to each other. Because one of the, not bugs in the system, rather, but it's a feature of the system of this whole AI supply chain is to make sure that workers are isolated. So they don't talk to each other. Some of them work from home, from whatever. So one of our aims was to break this barrier and say, no, workers should talk to each other, which is why we are so excited about the Data Labelers Association, because workers say they began talking like, hey, let's form an association. Let's put our thoughts together. Let's share our experiences, and then we can speak with one voice. So this is what the DWI is all about. So we went to a bunch of countries in 5 continents, actually. I'm not sure if there are data workers in Antarctica because we haven't had any of them join us. But if they are, we'd be more than happy to have
I
them
wouldn't
join
be
us.
surprised to know that they're even there,
I mean, I will not be surprised. So the next stage right now is, so we already have this repository, which is free for use by anyone who wants to use it, as long as they give due credit, which AI does not do, by the way. AI systems, they steal people's work and don't give credit. So we beg that they can use our work. It's free for use, but please acknowledge that, where you got this work. But the next stage that we're looking at now is we're now moving beyond just unearthing the exploitations, because we can only talk about this for so long. Now we are also trying to divert the attention more towards solutions. So what then can be done about this? Policy influence, emergence of worker-led movements, and different forms of advocacy. So that's what we're looking at now as we look at continuing the work of the Data Workers Inquiry.
That's great. Adio, I have one last question for you, because you're also involved with a distributed AI research institute, which is led by Timnit Gebru, who has been one of the loudest and most brilliant critics when it comes to AI. And one of the debates of the past few years about the existential risks. So these science fiction scenarios where AI is taking over the Terminator, blah, 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 and all that nonsense. But today we discuss some real problems that are already there and are really impacting on the lives of people in terrible and brutal ways. So my question for you is, how do you see the debate around AI evolving, and are voices like yours finally being heard when it comes to these are the real issues we need to talk about? So sorry, Sam Altman, let's keep science fiction away for the moment because we're talking about real people here. Do you see this is changing somehow in the public discourse?
My favorite German word is Jein. Yes and no.
Okay.
Ja und nein.
Yeah.
Because yes, voices like mine, like ours, are getting a little bit more airplay, are being heard a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I also feel like the voices that ought to be less loud are getting even louder. So, in as much as our voices are also being heard, the voices of the, I like how you characterized it. You said it's science fiction nonsense, because that is exactly what it is. The problem is that these people are being given even more airplay. I think without naming names, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but we have heard some people being called godfathers of AI. And when you listen to them talk, they are speaking absolute nonsense. But because they've been given some fancy awards by some organizations, which we won't mention here, now they have like a license to spew out as much garbage as they can. Because it seems like, I think money is going in that direction and not in our direction. It's unfortunate that people who are trying to push away the real harms, the present harms of AI, are the ones who are getting more airplay, and they get to tell us about these AI existential risks and stuff like this, which really should not be the case, because today we have real issues of exploitation. We have real issues of AI being discriminatory. We have real issues. We have had Black people being wrongfully arrested because some AI tool wrongfully identified them. We have heard cases of wrong diagnosis of darker skin tone people because the AI is built by people in Silicon Valley who have eugenics or the test real bundle, as Timnit would put it, as their core philosophy. So that is the actual existential crisis we have, not some Terminator coming from the future. Because if you know anything about AI, you realize that this situation of some guy coming back from the future and telling us that Skynet is taking over is not even remotely close.
Adio, this was a great conversation, and thanks a lot for your time. It has been brilliant to have you on Machines That Fail Us today.
Thanks for having me, Philip. It was nice talking to you.
The Machines That Fail Us podcast is produced by the Media and Culture Research Group at the Institute of Media and Communications Management at the University of St. Gallen, together with the Communications Department of the university. The post-production is curated by Podcast Schmiede. The next episode of the podcast will be released next month. You can listen to all the episodes of Machines That Fail Us on the University of St. Gallen website, the Human Error Project website, and all major audio and podcasting platforms. This is Philip Di Salvo, and on behalf of the entire Media and Culture Research Group, thank you for listening.